So I decided to give myself a creative assignment, kind of self-assigned creative assignment to stretch my creative muscles. And I decided to photograph my neighborhood. I've lived in my neighborhood for 8 years now, which is the longest I've ever lived in one single place. And I've never once taken my camera out with me in my neighborhood because I've always thought that it was kind of boring. Like, the architecture isn't super interesting. There's nothing like, or so I thought until I did this project. I always thought that I lived in the most like average suburban, boring neighborhood. And this project did change that. So for context, I live in Burbank, California, which is kind of known as like the media capital of the world. We have like over 100 media companies. We have Disney and Warner Brothers, all that stuff. I live here because I used to do photo editing at Disney and wanted to be able to walk to work. So a lot of the homes and people who live here are people who work at the studios. And I think a lot of the world thinks that if you work in entertainment or Hollywood, that you're rich, but I think you'll quickly see that that's not the case. The industry is just like any other industry, and the C-suite executives or the, top 1% of like directors and actors make the lion's share of the money, and everyone else in the industry is just like everyone else in every other industry and living a very modest life. So my neighborhood is kind of the neighborhood where the workers live. So it's a very like Americana neighborhood. And I decided to go out with my camera for like 1 hour a day. Sometimes I went at night, sometimes I went kind of midday, but I wanted to really force myself to like flex that creative muscle. So I would go out at like high noon, which I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably a photographer and you know that high noon, like any time between like noon and 2 is the most challenging time to make a good image because the light is just, it's not working in your favor. And so on top of that, the weather in Southern California is like sunny and 70 all the time. So I didn't have the advantages of weather helping to make an interesting image. Like I didn't have like fog to work with or like heavy looming clouds. It's very like bright, cheery, sunny and 70. So I tried my best to just like lean into that and saturate the colors and work with harsh shadows and like lines from the shadows. And I tried to do my best with a very like suburban neighborhood to make interesting images. And I'm not gonna say this is my best work when you see it, but it was a creative exercise that allowed me to see an area that for years I thought was very ordinary and find little bits and pieces within my surroundings that are uniquely interesting. Like, I fell in love with the trees in my area. I already love trees, and even with the love that I have for trees, I did not notice how fantastically amazing the trees are in my area. I mean, they are truly, like you'll see, some of them have faces in them. I kid you not, some of the trees in my area have faces in them, and more specifically, the trees outside of Disney have faces in them. And I now think that they should make an animated movie about trees, like the life of trees. You'll see when I go through them, like you'll see they have faces, and not like drawn on or carved in faces. Like they just naturally have like eyes and nose and mouth. You'll see. The other interesting thing about my neighborhood that I don't want to say I glazed over it, but Burbank is an equestrian zoned center, or like it's within the city limits. This area is zoned as an equestrian area. And you might think like, well, obviously that's interesting, but when you live here for 8 years, you just kind of are like, yeah, okay, there's an equestrian center down the road. But I also started to notice that like the signs are signs for the fact that the horses live here, and the houses have, I don't have horses, so I don't know what it's called, but it's the things that like you tie up your horse to when you know, you get to a location and you want your horse to stay where it's at. So those are like outside of everyone's homes, and people have steps so that you can like step up on the steps to get on the back of the horse. And like, there's all these things that are kind of built into kind of the culture of this area, which I just kind of glazed over it over the years. My neighbors, which I guess I've gotten used to it. And I don't know if it's because so many people here work in entertainment that they enjoy entertaining, but they love decorating their houses for the holidays. And I don't know if this is something that's like going on in America or if it's specific to my neighborhood, but they love the blow up decorations. I think they're ridiculous, but they make me smile. I don't want to say ridiculous. I don't want to judge, because I mean, they really brought a smile to my face when I was walking around, like, you know, kind of laugh and smile. And I'm sure they make kids happy. They're cute. So also, because it's the area of studios, you'll notice that like a lot of the decorations are from like characters from the studios. So there's a lot of like the Grinch and Mickey and Snoopy in the decorations. So I don't know. I felt after walking around and photographing the area that I see it in a different way. And that's what I love about photography, is that this project highlighted for me that I see the world differently when I have a camera in my hand. I really do. Like, I slow down and I notice the details. I'm looking for things that are interesting. I'm intentionally looking at like leading lines and shadows and unique things like doorways and decorations that people have that for years I've just passed them by. So yeah, and because it is the holiday season, I decided to also go out at night and photograph some holiday lights. So I will share those at the very end if you want to stick around for them. I think that they're, you know, they're nice. It's always nice to see holiday lights, and 'tis the season, so why not? So yeah, I hope you enjoy the series of images, and maybe this will inspire you to take your camera to a place that you think is ordinary, and it might help you to see it a little bit differently. I know it did for me. Like, I have a whole new appreciation of my neighborhood now. I think it's like quirky, and the trees are so much more magnificent than I ever thought. And yeah, I have a new appreciation for my neighbors. Like, okay, one last thing before I share the images. One of my neighbors has tons of stuff in their yard that I was always kind of like, I just thought that they kind of put a bunch of decorations in their yard. I didn't really think too much about it, but it was just like, okay, that's that neighbor. But because I had my camera in my hands, I walked up to the house and really took a second to look at it. And I now call it the kindness house. It's just wonderful. They have a tree that they call the kindness tree, and they hang a bunch of like inspiring quotes and things to be uplifting. And they had rocks that they put out for you to take home and paint one and share one once you've painted it. So yeah, I see my neighborhood and my neighbors in a different way now. So I hope you enjoy the series, and yeah, take your camera to a place that maybe you normally would think is boring, and you might see it differently. So I hope you enjoy it. The series.